Okay, to start this off, I want to start with what's necessary for the initial install for getting the CCDA service up and running. And generally, and in the instructions, it points to that you have to go to the command line and then CD into the CCDA service directory. Like I have a bash up now for version 7. So the first thing you want to do is to check and see what node version you're running. In this case, and what our default is and has been since version 6 of OpenEMR is 16, node version 16. So to install it, all you really have to do is do a node install. So unless this errors, you should be pretty well good to go. However, to check and make sure that the compile works and it's running, you'd want to do a run the application, which is called serve CCDA. Just a reminder, this is in the CCDA service directory off OpenEMR root. So just run the app, and if it doesn't error out on you, it will stay running. You can do this as a troubleshooting mechanism also. You can start this and then you can go to your application, go to modules, care coordination. You can search and grab your various date ranges. Automatically search the setup for the last 90 days. So any encounters older than that, you won't see it on the initial view when you go into CCDA. And then we can just do a simple CCDA here. So that's telling me that the service is working. So to go back, I want to make another point here. If, for instance, the service isn't running, or it won't run, or it runs and you can't generate a CCDA, then what you need to do is just do a clean install, because we know it's compiling. And I'll show you what happens when it won't compile here shortly. But you come back and do a node clean install, which will, well, oh, I'm sorry. It's NPN. That's why it takes me so long to do things anymore. Silly mistakes. Okay, what a clean install does is it will delete your node directory, your node modules directory right here, which has all dependencies for 3 services that run under the CCDA directory. It will clean that, and it will clean the package lock and rewrite the package lock so that you are current to the dependencies it's just installed plus the node version. Does that make sense to everybody? If I'm not making sense, please let me know. Okay. So that's all there is to an install. And generally it runs and works great. What happens though is that when you install OpenEMR, either a new install or an update, our release package is set usually for what we build on, which has been in the past 16.13 version of Node. 16 went up to 16.16, and then I think it jumped to 17. However, as long as you're within a major release of the node, generally it will compile just fine without having to rewrite the log file. However, if you go to a new major version of Node, which the latest is 18, and you try to install, it may install. Let me just go check, see what if I've got node service running. Oh, that's another thing I need to remind you. Whenever you're making changes or updating the CCDA service, make sure you don't have any node processes running, because sometimes it won't compile if there's already a node service running, or B, you may compile and think you have the current version running, although if you have a process already running on the old stuff, then you won't see it. So you have to make sure that you shut down any node processes running and then restart them for new changes to take effect. All right, if you notice, it compiled okay on version 18. However, most likely if I try to run it, it's going to fail. The reason it failed is because the previous compiled version was on version 16 and we're running version 18. So what's happening is that when we recompile with under version 18, it's not rewriting the log file. So what you can do then is do a clean install. That will delete all the existing node modules and rewrite them. Should rewrite the package lock also. There we go. And for my sake, I hope this just generates the CCDA so I can move on. Good. I want to stop for a second. Anybody have any questions, or I may not be communicating well? Anything, or is it pretty straightforward to everybody? Feedback? Anybody?
Sounds good to me.
Anything in the chat?
Not so far. I think that that CCDA just looked beautiful, Jerry. So
yeah, I think we did a pretty good job, didn't we, Stephen?
I agree. But I mean, I'm pretty used to Node and stuff, so I don't have any questions about that. But I mean, I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. Oh, Legrand Decius. I hope I'm saying that correct. I'm wondering if there's any impact from multiple site installations, how this works on a multi-site.
That's an interesting question. It's a good question. It should be seamless. Okay. Because, you know, the source code for multi-site runs out of the same directory. The only difference between multi-site and any core applications is in our documents directory and where documents get stored and what database is being used. So the only problem you could run into is if you happen to have installed that's interesting. If you install the module, no, I don't see any issues. And I don't recall if I've seen people use multi-site with CCDA, so I'm going to say no, because whatever version you're running in default site of Node is going to be the same version you're going to be running in the multi-site. So
Yeah, this is Brady. I'd agree. It shouldn't have any impact.
the only
multi-site, yeah.
impact would be is what your database says for your module setup, because if you're going to have different authors, things like that, and I'm going to go into the module setup here in a second. I just hopefully want to make clear that when you first install OpenEMR and you want to use CCDA, you have to go currently to the CCDA service directory and do a node install. I recommend that anytime you do a node install, you also do a clean install. So you should do an install first and then a clean install, because if you try to do a clean install and you've changed your node version, it will fail every time. It'll keep telling you to do an install. So the messaging from the NPM service is pretty good and pretty clear concerning differences in versions between specific compiled dependencies and not. The only dependency that can give you an issue on the install would be the live XML.js. And a little history concerning previous installs for CCDA services, that there's one dependency for the XML library, parsing, etc., that only had the compiled version for Linux. It didn't have it for Mac or for Windows. So you had to install the build tools when you installed Node on Windows. And that was so that that library would get compiled. And it would take maybe 30, 40 seconds to compile that library. However, I did find a repository that has the compiled versions where for Windows, it will go ahead and download the compiled version. It doesn't have to compile. So if you run across the case where you do a node install and it wants to come up and try to compile that library and can't, that means you didn't install the Windows build tools when you installed Node. So I believe I've got that in my install doc that you should, used to be, it was deprecated, but now I've made it a recommend to install the build tools when you install Node on Windows. So that's the only issue that can be troublesome. However, I haven't seen any issues with that in quite a while. I don't know at what point we're going to have to compile those libraries ourselves and host them in our own repo, but hopefully won't be too far off. And we won't have to do it.
There's a question on the chat from Sherwin about does the current C-CDA import plan of treatment?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that, Sherwin. Yeah, let's get to that probably at the end of the call or at the end of the video or sometime. But I do have an answer for you, but it's kind of lengthy. So moving forward. So the install, the best I can say is to follow the README. Whenever you're doing an install, do the npm install, then do the clean install, and you shouldn't have any problems. So if nobody has any questions about that, jump over to managing the CCDA. what you do it in managed modules, care coordination. Assume you have that all installed when you first come up. I believe we install those now, right, Brady, in the database?
Yeah, they're all installed automatically. All that
Right.
stuff.
So all you need to do is go to the config. There's a lot to this config, but I recommend ignoring everything except for access control and settings. Under access control, this is where you set up permissions for who's allowed to use CCDA and who's not. In this case, I just have it set up for administrators. But you can turn on that administrator can send it to the HIE, which currently we're not supporting, although it does work. We just don't send it anywhere. We don't have that mechanism to send to distance. What happens though, currently it gets queued up in the documents directory and it sends the generated CCDA to the document so that it can get grabbed by whatever cron job somebody wants to set up to grab it and send it. So currently we're not worried with HIE, but in the future we might be. So once you have your permission set up, you go to settings. Now in settings, I have no clue why mine's blank. Anyway, this is the global settings for what gets set in the CCDA document, regardless of what the document type is, whether it's a CCD, a referral note, or just a clinical note. Author is very important because everything in CCDA requires an author. The author for the document, the author for various sections, counters, what have you. This is default. If it's not already set within that element, say an encounter provider is not documented in the encounter, just for instance, then it reverts to this default author. Data enter is not important, but should be set, so we can set it in our CCDA. Same for informant. Now, I don't know why the original developers who set this up has two boxes here, so ignore it. But what the informant is the person telling on the other providers, you might say. So custodian is generally the clinic where the document's originating from. So they're the custodian of that document. Once it gets imported elsewhere, the custodianship changes to that clinic, etc. Legal authenticators and authenticators should be filled out, although they're not that important. Primary care provider is pretty important. Although it doesn't make sense to have a global primary care provider, it does make sense if there's not a provider for the patient when we generate the documents, because we have to provide that, whether it's the documentation of the entire document or documentation of an encounter or prescription or what have you. Now, this is important to be compliant, is to have a date for the author, who that author is going to hold providence over the document. So it's not required for us to generate CCDAs, but it is recommended. You set that and you set the date that he's going to be, or that person's going to be the initial date for that authorship. So you set the date here. The office contact, it's best to go ahead and provide that also, because we do use it in the document. It's not required in the document, although for informational purposes, it's nice to have in the document. So while you're here, you may as well set everything and just save it.
Hey, Jerry, can I jump in on that forced provenance author date for a second?
Sure.
Say like, most people are going to leave that off because you want the provenance date to be the date of when the data was actually created. But if you're going to go through any kind of ONC certification, like if Jerry and I get hit by a bus and that knowledge is gone, you need that, like, because ONC requires all the dates to be on their certification. They all had to be the exact same date.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and spit this out one more time. It's the silliest thing I've ever heard of. So
Yeah.
we'll get in all that, but
Yeah, but
the
it is
head scratcher for sure.
But most people will want to just leave that off, leave that on, just use the provenance date from whatever the data is generated with. So
Yeah. All right, thank you for that. Any questions on setup here? These hooks, well, oh, here we are. Just tells us where you want to hook out of, just if you want to send to HIE. You can do it out of reports, encounters, demographics, or modules, meaning other Zen modules. But since we're not supporting HIE right now, I wouldn't worry with it. This mapper was meant to map various different notes and things as to where the generator was supposed to grab the information in order to support these basic required templates in CCDs. So you could map procedure order to, say, plan of care, et cetera, et cetera. This, although at the time was pretty nice, it's a little bit hard to figure out, but I get the gist of what they were trying to do here. But I cannot imagine any administrator is going to go in and even know where to map all this stuff. So this section is pretty much useless because now I don't pay any attention to it in my generator. I know where to go grab all this stuff. So don't pay any attention to that. Don't even try to use it. All right, any questions about settings? All right. Now, basically for export purposes, you do everything from the care coordination module export. First, use the date ranges to search for what encounters you want to include, which I don't have many in this particular instance, except one patient. The select measures to appear in report is for CQM. So if you're not going to be doing anything with CQM, you just ignore it. You can search by patient name or their PID or even by a counter. I never see any reason to do all that. It's just, to me, gets in the way. Now, this does, it tells you all the times that you've exported for this particular patient a CCDA. So you have that logged there. Otherwise, you can just click the patient, send it download, or you can send it to EMR Direct if you have a EMR direct account. HIE, like I said, it works, but it only generates the document, sticks it in the document folder for now. Generally, most we're going to do a download for CCDA. What send filtered is to only send documents within the date range that you selected for the search. Oh, great. That can't be good. Probably when I change versions and recompiled and make sure I'm on the right version. Yeah.
That looked like a data error. Did you miss something on the settings? I think you forced a
I
date.
don't know.
Didn't put in the date on the global
Oh,
setting.
oh. For the Providence.
Yeah,
All right. Guess I could have looked at there. Huh?
it gave you a UUID error.
I probably should have just stayed out of settings.
Do you need to set that province author date? Is that what that is? Or
Yeah, if I had it selected, but I didn't set the date, so that's
oh, you
like,
don't need to select it. You don't need to. Okay.
no, you don't have to. It's for we
Um,
stuck it in there for ONC's ridiculous way you have to handle authorship in a document. I still haven't figured out why, because it's not even following spec, in my opinion. So I guess it's beside the point. We did it because we had to do it.
Bend over and take your medicine.
Took me a while to get over that. I wanted to argue it, but I didn't want to be the bad guy. I wasn't it. Brady, just pause the video.
Okay, I'll pause it here. Give me a second.
Okay, we took a little bit of break there for an issue that had nothing to do with the CCDA install. So moving on, I was showing the generation of a CCDA and how to export it. So we went through the search, and in my case, I only have one patient in this particular database. So you can select the patient, select download for CCDA, then send it, which generates a document, a zip document that has a folder that includes the HTML version and the XML version and the style sheet for that particular patient. If there was more than one patient, which we're going to do here in a short minute, then this document can contain all the patient's documents within the same directory. They're not split out patient by patient, so it makes the imports a lot easier. So having that, we can move on, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to another browser with an instance of that's running with our latest out of master. I have more patients in here. These actually are the patients we use for O&C testing. So I need to mention that specific to OpenEMR, I created a feature to where you can export all the patient's documents along with the CCDA. And what that does is it generates an unstructured document that companions the XML and HTTP documents that have no real use for anything except if you're going to import back into OpenEMR. In that case, say you want to move a patient from one OpenEMR instance to another, you can export with the documents, and on import, it will import the documents for you. And I'll show you that here in a second. So I'm just going to do one patient at a time. I've selected the export documents. Even if you select export documents, the generated CCDA will still be the correct CCDA or a normal CCDA. The export document doesn't affect the CCD document in any way whatsoever. Just want to mention that. So I've created and that patient doesn't have any documents. So let me select another one. And I know he has documents, so let me go export him. Okay. So if you notice, not only does it have his HTML version and an XML version, now it's got an unstructured document, and that document contains all the documents as base64 files for that patient. So if we go back to do an import, import now works. You can import zip files or individual files now. Okay, this is telling me is that Jeremy Bates, that there's a duplicate document, which in this case is the document import, that unstructured document, and then regular CCDA, because these match with demographics data. It's going to tell you that, which is okay. And then you can just chart depending. And there's Jeremy Bates. We import most all demographic information. That all works if it's available. The only thing we don't necessarily import our clinical notes yet, which here soon I'll be adding, but most everything else will get imported. If you notice, these are all the documents that got imported from the other version of OpenEMR. So that means that in the dashboard, we should have the documents. Not sure why. Okay, it imported them. I don't know why it's not showing in the dashboard, but it did import the documents.
It looks like the directories may have been moved, but like the photograph has a signature in it, or maybe it was like that originally. I don't know.
I don't know. It imported them, so I don't know why it's not showing in the dashboard. It's just to aggravate me, I guess. I mean, it has in the past. All right. Well, it imported the document. So that's pretty much it.
We got a question from the chat about the documents from
Okay.
John. What formats can it import? And then the other question related to that is HTML only or others?
No, any format that we will import normally will get transferred. I mean, I've tested with JPEG, PNGs, PNGs, and HTML, XML, PDFs. So
that's good to know. Yeah, because okay, great, thanks.
So I don't know what more I can tell you. It's pretty much an overview. Sometimes they get a little quirky. There's so many things going on with CCDA. It generally points back to the install. The issues I had probably wouldn't normally have had, but I've got two versions running here and on two different node versions, and I was just trying to make it break the show a way out of it. Generally, the way out of it is just do a clean install. And I hope this has been helpful. Unless I've missed something that somebody wants to hear about that I can help with, go ahead, ask questions.
Now, Jerry, I don't know if you showed this already. I was in there working on that other bug, but did you show them that the CCDAs get populated inside the documents for that patient in their CCDA folder?
I'm sorry, I missed that. In the documents, in dashboard documents?
In the patient documents, it'll populate their documents inside that CCDA folder.
Oh, you're talking about here?
Yeah, when they generate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when it clicks on that, this is different than all the other documents, but when you click on that, it brings up the preview of it. So
Of what? The CCDA? Yeah, okay.
preview.
Yeah, I don't like the whole idea of storing that. Every time you generate a CCDA, storing it in the patient documents folder. I suppose there may be a HIPAA reason to do that or something that I'm not aware of. I just don't see how it's necessary unless it's just documenting history.
Yeah.
But it's still just an interop as far as I'm concerned. We don't document and load history for all our interops. I don't see how that's possible. So I don't know why we do this. That was decision by the original authors of the module, and I'm assuming it was probably a ONC requirement for testing.
Probably was. And then I don't know if people care too much, but they can customize the settings of how those CCDAs look inside their profile.
Right.
It's
Let's see where I'm at here.
in the config. Yeah, there's a care coordination settings down at the bottom.
Yeah, this is where you can order the sections that get displayed in the document itself.
Yeah, so
Like the ordering. Oh, go ahead. You can explain it, Stephen.
I was gonna say, so right now, if you want to, people can drag and drop. This was something that Jerry kind of picked up from the framework that you can, if you want to rearrange it just as you're seeing it, and you can also hide and collapse those by clicking on those icons for the different clinical sections. But some people in their workflow, yeah, if you just click that, do it like if you scroll down on the CCDA, you can see some of those, and then you can just like hide allergies or history and all that stuff. So if people want to actually see this, they can change that. But some people have their specific workflows, and this was an ONC requirement that we had to do, being able to allow to choose what sections people want to see in a CCDA document. Maybe some people only want to see medications and problem lists and procedures for their workflow or whatever. So in the OpenEMR configuration, that first screen that Jerry was at in the config, you can do this for the entire system. In the config, let's see, yeah, configuration. You can do this for everything. You can limit how many sections you want to see. If you only want to see 3 sections total in a CCDA, you can say what sections you want to see by default in that section display order. So you can say, put in problem list and history of medication or whatever. Right. This is also for developers. This is a widget that you can start adding. There are a couple of different types of CCDA documents: transition of care, referrals, care plans, stuff like that. So they can have different order based upon that. Again, that was an ONC requirement. And then all these settings could be done at the individual level in the user preferences. Jerry, I guess you could just show that since we're doing this on the recording. You can go to the user preferences and show that there too.
User preferences.
Up in the top right, the user icon, click on the user icon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go to settings. Yeah, so these are user permission overrides that can override the individual global settings.
Oh, per provider, right.
Per provider can set up what they want to see in their CCDA document.
Which is nice. It's one of my favorite features of OpenEMR is this user setting for globals.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's it. That was my very, very small piece of contribution to all the amazing.
Wasn't so small to do, trust me. Considerable work, and I think it turned out very nice. I really do like our at least our reports, even though you have to go through everything that you have to go through to get it to show. But once it shows, we're pretty good. We support and certified for release up to release 3, which is 2.2, I believe, or 2.1 Cures with Cures Act. So if anybody ever asked you, that's what we support. I might want to mention too on import, about the only thing we weren't required to do imports for our last go around of ONC certification, but our next go around we will be required to show the import, the audit trails and all that that's necessary to do that. So currently we import No clue why that took so long. So that's the CCDA. Just to mention, we will show and run Symmetron and syntax validations on all the documents, and this is where you can get the errors. These errors that you're seeing now has to do that because I wasn't populating either in a facility or a provider doesn't have an MPI or some such. But at any rate, you can review what you imported here. And problems, your encounters, plan of care. Would have thought they had a plan of care. And the only thing that we don't support that needs to be supported here soon is clinical notes from encounters. We export them, but we're not currently importing them. So otherwise, we import most everything that's required by CCD as you see them here, including medical devices.
Yeah,
So-
meaning community of care document or a transition of care document, essentially. Right. We support them.
Yeah, but you know how that goes. Those documents or those document types, say for instance, the transition of care is really just a continuity of care document or an episodic document, but it has a narrowed focus on just what supports a particular clinical note that you're creating the document for. Say a procedure note, it will just hold the encounter for the procedure or any encounters representing that particular procedure or any labs or what have you. They have particular sections that are required, although you only have to make sure that you have the required sections necessary for that document type. But what we do is we send all sections regardless and ensure that we have the required documents for a particular CCDA type, i.e. a clinical note type, a referral, or a transition of care. Really, transition of care documents are, any document that is for the patient to change the care for that patient, i.e. transferring the patient to another EMR or doing a referral. That's considered part of a transition of care, et cetera, et cetera. I could find no spec saying there's an actual transition of care document type. So if anybody knows any different, pipe up, because I'd love to know. Because they use that term, transition of care.
They use it everywhere, but they renamed it like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. Same thing what they did. Care plan went to plan of care, and now it's plan of treatment. So that's all I have. Any questions before we turn the video off? All right, Brady, I'm done.
I guess the only thing I would also mention is that something we did as part of our O&C certification with C-CDA is that if you're using anything like EMR Direct, or if you built your own kind of direct interface, we do import C-CDAs using the direct protocol. We also handle all of the error checking and the schematron stuff, just checking to make sure the document is valid, like Jerry was saying. All that's handled in our messages interface.
Part of those services that get installed when you install the CCDA.
Yeah,
There's 2 separate services that run to do that. But he's right. You also will get a notification if you receive the document via direct. So it's pretty nice. I'm not going to go through all that because I'm not really set
Yeah.
up with my direct, but he's right. There was a lot of work put into that, and it turned out pretty nice. So for those capabilities, if you want another EMR or patient to send you a episodic note or a referral note, we have the capability. All you have to do is publish your direct address, and it's pretty seamless on the back end, right, Stephen?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's pretty nice. We did a lot of work in there, and that's with yeah. We did a lot of work as far as checking those and making and grabbing in all those documents. Yeah, maybe we'll have to do another video another time on it, but big shout out also to Luis with EMR Direct, because he helped us out with all that stuff too.
Yeah, the specification side of it and guidance and what OSC really means by what they're telling people to send. Because sometimes you just need somebody that's done it and says, well, it sounds like they mean that, but really they mean this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So all in all, CCDA has come a long ways, and we're still working on it. I'm planning here very soon to try to write a install for CCDA and to check current status of CCDA services, et cetera, et cetera. So that's in my plan, so that you don't have to go to command line to do this. It gets a little bit touchy, but it's doable. It's the only way I can see to get around sending people to command line to install this, because people just won't use it if it becomes too much of an issue for them to install it. So I hope this was helpful. If not, well, you can talk about me when I leave the call, if you like.
All good things. All good things, Jerry.
Okay. You can stop the video.